This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for watching this week's NC Spin. Promises to be 30 minutes well spent as we begin by asking if the bipartisan road of cooperation in our state on COVID-19 has taken a partisan turn this week. We examine what the state auditor calls a $700 million mismanagement issue at DOT and ask whether they've done enough to fix it. And we're going to look ahead to determine what needs to happen before our children start school August 17th. And of course, as always, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of which, this week's panel includes John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Howard Lee, former state senator and head of the Board of Education, State Board of Education, Chris Fitzsimon, director of State's Newsroom, and Donna Martinez from WPTF Radio and the John Locke Foundation. We're going to begin our uninterrupted discussion after these brief messages from our underwriters.
If you think you may have COVID-19, please remember, people who are mildly ill are able to recover at home. If possible, stay in a specific sick room and stay in touch with your doctor. Be sure to seek medical care right away if your symptoms become severe, like difficulty breathing. Most important, whether you have mild symptoms or no symptoms, we should all stay home to prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
In more than 21 years on NC Spin, I never endorsed a product or sponsor, but I volunteered to do this message for family physicians. Over the past 40 years, my family doctor could quickly diagnose my illnesses because he knew my medical history. Evidence suggests I'll live longer, have a higher quality of life, and save 33% on health care costs. I believe in my trusted relationship with my family physician.
Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Let's begin the spin. North Carolina entered phase one of reopening last Friday, but whereas we saw early demonstrations of bipartisan cooperation and good spirit, we're now seeing increasing signs of partisanship, as evidenced by the Reopen NC movement. Senate Bill 712, a sheriff says he won't enforce the order for the number of worshipers, and a letter from Republican members of the Council of State to the governor. We want our panel to talk about this and how well we're doing in our reopening. Donna, last time you were on our show, and I remember it very vividly because you talked about so many good things you saw going on during COVID-19, people cooperating together, working together. In recent days, though, we've seen strong partisanship evidencing itself. Are you surprised by this?
Not really, Tom. This has gone on for a very long time, and there's really not much end in sight. And what we're seeing emerge is the difference in the way that the two major political parties view the role of government. We have a Democratic governor who has used a very muscular, robust power of government to literally control the movements and the lives of 10 million North Carolinians. You have the Republicans who are saying, look, that should be the last resort, not the first resort. But Tom, even more than the partisanship, what we're really seeing now is this friction between public health and economic health. And I don't think it's a surprise that a lot of the protesters, whether they're in the streets or whether they're on social media, they're the people whose jobs have been eliminated, or their friends, their customers, their families, and they are very, very nervous. The counter-protesters tend to be the people who still have jobs, who have been deemed essential workers, and who are on the front lines of the healthcare portion of this story. But people are nervous, and they need and want to get back to work.
I got all of that, Donna, but I mean, really, for instance, there was a headline in the Friday Carolina Journal that said North Carolinians are starting to push back over COVID-19 lockdowns. Howard Lee, wouldn't a more accurate headline have been Republicans and conservatives are starting to push back? I don't see any Democrats doing this protesting. Do you?
It seems to be moving in that direction, and that's what's so disappointing to me. this COVID-19 is a very serious problem that's going to impact people regardless of their partisan affiliation. I think the whole problem is being created by our leadership and not necessarily by the general public. I think the people generally recognize this is a very serious thing that has to be dealt with, but I'm not getting a lot of reassurance from our political leaders.
Yeah, John, as far as it goes, Governor Cooper and Secretary Cohen announced on Thursday that all of the trend lines are moving in the right directions, and they didn't come right out and say it, but it's highly suspected that on May 22nd, they're going to relax the restrictions even more. So what is it that's made it so urgent this week? I mean, can't these folks wait one more week? What is it about it? Or do they just not want any restrictions, John?
I think that it's important to remember that every single day the restrictions stay in place, North Carolina's economy suffers probably something like $100 million of damage. I mean, it's not a minor matter to wait another week or two. But I agree with you. I think that the Cooper administration will almost certainly move to phase two, because everybody else is. I mean, the problem is North Carolina is out of step with the rest of the region. Now, we might be right, and everybody else might be wrong. I doubt it. But I suspect that North Carolina will probably even perhaps faster than the governor originally intended start to come into line with what most of the rest of the Southeast is doing. Even Virginia now has had restaurants open.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's where we're going. I'm not surprised about the partisan disagreements.
Yeah.
They somewhat reflect different perceptions of government, as Donna said, but also the cues, the different cues that Democratic and Republican politicians are sending to their followers.
Chris, there are a lot of people who are saying, wait a minute, let's put this thing down on its three legs of the stool that it's supposed to be on, and that is Governor Cooper has a 74% approval rating from the public of North Carolina, and this is all about politics. Republicans are just trying to get into this game and do something to discredit him. Would you agree or disagree with that position?
I think I would agree with. I think that's part of it. I don't think it's true for everybody. I do think there are millions of people who are frustrated and worried about their jobs, as Donna said. I think this is very complicated. It's worth noting we're the 9th or 10th biggest state in the country. We're 21st in the number of deaths we've had from COVID. So part of that is Governor Cooper and Secretary Cohen have taken a conservative approach, and I think it has saved lives. I think they both realize, we all realize, we can't stay like this forever. What gives me the most pause is that we sit here and I appreciate everybody's point of view, and we're all trying to be thoughtful about it. The protesters, I think, I was a little concerned this week. There was some religious leaders who were protesting who wanted their churches opened, and they were standing shoulder to shoulder. I think I saw one mask in the video of maybe a couple of hundred people. There's a famous case out of Washington State where a church choir was singing. 52 people out of 60 got sick, 30 were diagnosed, and several died. And nobody was really symptomatic.
Well, let's talk about.
We're still sort of ignoring those. One more quick point: the fact that we're not wearing masks, and that's not the president of the United States, and people aren't wearing masks when they're among other people, is the most offensive thing in a way when you really think about it. Not when you're by yourself. You literally are putting other people's health at risk, and our leaders aren't saying that enough.
Donna, let's talk about this church movement, because on Thursday, a couple hundred people protested in Raleigh the stipulation that only 10 people could be worshiping at one time in a building, in a congregation. This group of a couple of hundred, frankly, was led primarily by the Christian Action League. It was all white. It was mostly conservative evangelicals. In the meantime, the North Carolina Council of Churches, which has 18 denominations representing more than 16,000 churches, said they disagreed with this. They are okay with keeping these restrictions open. How much of this should we take and discredit? How much of it should we credit?
Well, Tom, I just think that every person needs to make their own decision. It doesn't matter to me if someone is or isn't comfortable going inside a church. That's up to people to decide. Now, certainly, Chris is right. We have to take precautions because this is a serious public health issue. But that doesn't mean that for long periods of time, week upon week upon week, that we are supposed to essentially give up things that are fundamental to us. For many people, going to church, the fellowship that it represents, as well as the worship that it represents, is essential to their life. We're going on past 2 months here. each person should be able to decide. This is fundamental to who we are in our country. So if those denominations or those churches decide they don't want to open up indoor services, that's fine by me, because I believe in their right to make their own decision.
I agree with you completely. They have a right to make that decision. But Howard, doesn't their right end where my right begins? I mean, the churches are saying, hey, we don't want to endanger or risk the health of our congregants. How do you cut that fine line of rights?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. I don't think anybody has a right to infect anybody else. And if people are exposing themselves to the possibility of contracting this disease, they are also exposing me if I come in contact with them, either accidentally or on purpose. I just get really concerned about how people are putting so much emphasis on this physical going to church. You don't have to go to church in order to express your religion or enjoy a relationship with God. But I just think we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're gonna pay a price. I've often said that it's better to have short-term pain than and have some long-term gain. And that's where I think we are right now. We need to stop this foolishness of believing that we can control this virus and blaming other people for what's happening, and not taking some discomforts, because long-term, it doesn't make any difference whether you have a job or not. If your health is gone, you can't hold it anyway.
Chris, we could discuss some other facets of this partisanship issue. I think we have basically said what needs to be said. Next week, the legislature is coming back into session. Have you heard any discussion about what they're planning to do? For instance, are they going to do anything about increasing the amount of unemployment insurance that a person gets from $350 to $400 a week? That's a fairly modest increase. Are they going to do anything about relaxing the standards temporarily, at least, for people to go on Medicaid to be able to get tested and get treated? You know anything of what they're doing?
Well, I think there's going to be proposals to do that, certainly, just like there were proposals to do that in the session they just had recently, in the COVID session. So I think we'll see that big debate. I know that we talked last week about the Republican leadership in the Senate did not agree to allow Medicaid to be expanded just for COVID treatment or COVID testing. And the argument is they're spending money and they'll cover it. They'll give it to the hospitals. The problem is a lot of people aren't aware of that, so they won't go to the hospital to get tested or get treatment if they don't know it, instead of enrolling in Medicaid. I think this is going to be a very complicated session. Lawmakers have said they want to treat it in some ways as a normal session, and they can do that a little bit, but overwhelmingly the issue is how to help North Carolina's economy and how to make sure we keep our public health.
John, I guess my overarching thing here, and candidly I try to call them like I see them, is I wish the leadership of our legislature was acting as concerned about individuals like people who are below that income threshold, people who are getting unemployment insurance, as they seem to be about the politics of this particular thing. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I disagree with it. The disagreements about Medicaid or the extent of the lockdown, how quickly it should be phased out, so these are real differences of opinion. We should expect them. We should welcome healthy disagreements. I agree that protesters should be more responsible when they're expressing their views, but the bottom line is the governor of North Carolina is one elected official. He is among many others who have also been elected. They also have roles to play. We should not expect them all to just jump to his tune, particularly when his tune...
But he's the chief executive officer of the state of North Carolina, John. You don't disagree with that.
He only has the authority in this situation the legislature gave him by statute.
I have got the statutes with me, by the way.
And I think that statute is likely to be one of the subjects of legislation during this session. I think the legislature will try to amend that statute.
Yeah, I've got those statutes with me because I consulted a former Supreme Court justice, and they are necessarily kind of vague. They don't particularly deal specifically with these issues. So I guess we will talk more about those after the legislature comes back into session.
Tom?
Yes.
Tom, remember, too, that the Council of State, those are all statewide elected officials. And for the statewide shutdown order, the governor did not have the support of all of the members of the Council of State. And
read those statutes, Donna. It doesn't say that he has to.
That is debatable, and that's what they're going to work on in the legislature's trying to refine that.
But as they now stand, they would end up in a court, and it would be years before it got decided, and by that time, we're out of this mess.
Yeah, the litigation is probably going to be moot, but the issue is going to remain.
Let's switch topics. Public schools were suspended in the middle of March, and while it was hoped that teaching could proceed online, we know that's been spotty. Now education leaders are saying they want to start the new school year on August 17th, a week earlier than last year. Howard Lee is former chair of the State Board of Education. What issues concern you about reopening, and what should be done to make sure our schools are safe?
I'm not convinced that we have made enough progress in developing plans and guidelines that can be communicated to local state boards of education. I know that there's a task force at work, and I know the state board and the legislature are holding meetings trying to come up with some way to move forward. But I think we'd better be very careful in terms of setting specific times to open our public schools and then taking action to follow through on that. There is an awful lot of preparation that needs to be done. For example, how many masks do we have for students when they return to school? How many hand washing stations or sanitizing stations have we put in place? And I could go on with a long list of things that I think need to be considered, but also need to be taken care of. We should not fall into the trap, as the federal government fell into, of being unprepared and unable to respond in a timely way to try and control this situation. And in our public schools, it will be a petri dish.
Yeah, and John, you wrote a column about this week, as a matter of fact. And it, you know, it started me thinking, this all begins with putting 30 or 40 kids on a school bus.
Yes.
Closely together, trying to get them to school, and then you get them into a classroom when there are 25 or 30 kids crammed up with each other. Then you got the cafeteria. You've got this thing is very problematic on August 17th. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. I think it will absolutely happen. Schools will reopen in August. Schools are already reopening in Europe. They will reopen because they have to reopen. But that doesn't mean we don't have significant challenges, and you've just mentioned several of them. For example, I don't think cafeterias will reopen. I think that meals will be served at desks. That there will be, as Howard was talking about, lots of need for sanitizing stations and masked staff members and so forth. But really, truly, the alternative is not schools going to be out through the fall. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, so far as it goes, though, I asked Representative Craig Horn about this a couple of weeks ago when I interviewed him on this show. And I said, Craig, we've been talking for years about the fact that we needed to reform education in North Carolina. COVID-19 is almost forcing that to happen. Would you agree, Chris?
Well, I think it's certainly forcing it to happen now. The question will be, how do we balance those things as we move forward? I think we've learned a lot, but I think we're never going to get to where everybody is at school at home. So we have to figure out what to do in the meantime. I think it has exposed things like your internet connection at home, your ability to access technology, and all sorts of those things, which we need to fix.
And Donna, one of the things that is sort of troublesome about all of this is right this minute, we've already elaborated on several things that are problematic so far as reopening schools are concerned. We need the best out-of-the-box thinking we can possibly get, and we're mired in a situation where the state superintendent and the State Board of Education and the legislature and the governor are basically at odds with each other in a lot of instances. What's it going to take to make sure we get good, solid thinking as we try to open these schools?
Well, I think it's going to be a requirement. They're going to have to do this. The biggest concern, I think parents may rise up about this. First of all, you may have some parents who are concerned about putting their kids back into a traditional classroom. In that case, then we need some action to lift the caps on enrollment for virtual schools. You may find parents who think this is a great idea. For those kids who are going to go back in, Tom, we have no idea what the disparity in knowledge will be when those kids go back in. We know that there are thousands and thousands of kids who haven't even logged on or connected with their teacher virtually. We have anecdotal stories that teachers are saying some of the kids who are traditionally the most engaged inside a classroom are not showing that same interest online. Imagine if you're a teacher on day one and you have no idea whether the kids...
Where your kids are.
Exactly. So we need to then take those traditional end of session, end of year tests and move them up to the beginning. Day one, those kids have got to be tested so a teacher has some idea of the baseline that he or she is dealing with.
To agree with what Donna's saying, Howard, we've got something like 30,000 kids in North Carolina out of our 100,500,000 who don't have laptops or tablets. Many of them can't get high-speed internet connections. We've been expecting them to learn online. Give us a letter grade as to how well that's worked.
It's not worked well at all. And I think what's happened is the chickens are coming home to roost with regards to our having known for a long time that there was disparity in access for a lot of kids. And of course, through my institute, I've really been focusing on the low income kids and how they do not have the same access as other kids. And I think that's a real problem, but it's bringing it to the surface. And now I think we're going to have to deal with it going forward.
We've talked about how are you going to get 30 kids with social distancing in a classroom? Most everybody agrees that's going to be kind of problematic. Chris, there's some people that are saying, okay, here's what we're going to have to do. And Craig Horn alluded to this the other day. We're going to have some kids that are going to go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to have other kids that are going to go Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Number one, what do you think of that transaction? And number two, won't this demand that we have a lot of additional teachers?
Well, I mean, I think we can work this out. It would require maybe some additional teachers, or teachers to have slightly different schedules, or maybe to cut back on certain classes and have other classes. But if that's what it takes to keep kids safe, I think people and parents will do that. I think Howard is right about the immediate concern is all the physical sort of infrastructure at the schools that we need to be putting in place now to get prepared. There's no way we can outfit all these schools in a couple of weeks if we decide when we're going back. I guess.
Well, it's less than 3 months now. Yeah, we're less than 3 months away from starting school.
That's right. And increasingly, we're going to also rely on local superintendents, local principals, PTAs. This has to be a community effort at every school.
John, I talked about needing out-of-the-box thinking. One thing that I did hear that is sort of encouraging to me is there's a movement afoot to make our school buses hotspots. What do you think of that idea? How well will that work?
Well, it's already happening in some places. It's a good idea. We need to continue that kind of thinking because even if and when, and I think it's when we open schools in August, there will be some parents who will be uncomfortable, and they're going to want some alternative ways to have their children, at least for a while, gain instruction. And so thinking about ways, as Howard said, to address some of those disparities, inequalities of access to the grid and to technology to use the internet, that's going to be an essential part of our process going forward.
I want to get to tell us something we don't know, but Donna, we haven't even opened up the Pandora's box about higher education in our universities, because how are we going to get all those kids in dormitories and lecture halls that have 200 students in them? And this is another issue that if our university is going to start back again this fall, we got to resolve that one too.
Well, exactly. And imagine if you're a parent and you've paid a pretty penny for your child to go to the school of his or her choice, and you're expecting a great experience. For a lot of those students and parents, that in-person atmosphere is a big piece of this. So are we going to see more lawsuits for give me back part of my tuition because I'm not getting the full experience? And then the academics, is a whole other question.
We're going to do a 2-minute, speaking about doing things, we're going to do a 2-minute drill on Tell Us Something We Don't Know. Chris Fitzsimon, I'll start with you.
Well, nobody wants to keep people at home. We have to get the economy moving, but the worst thing is to have people come back to work and get sick, and we do this all over again. Here's a stat from Johns Hopkins. 20% of the hospitalizations now for COVID virus are between the ages of 20 and 44. It's not just old people.
Howard Lee, tell us something we don't know.
I just want to give a shout out to the frontline troops, teachers and principals who are doing everything they can to both keep their students engaged as well as trying to lessen the impact of the negativism of not being able to graduate for seniors.
Yeah, I got to tell you, there are a lot of people that are facing some unusual circumstances right now. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
State revenues are about $730 million lower through the end of April than they were last year. They will probably end up being about $1 billion below projections just for this fiscal year.
That's what Barry Boardman told us. That was his projection. Donna Martinez, tell us something we don't know.
Well, pajamas are in and pants are out. Adobe Analytics is taking a look at our buying behavior during the pandemic, and pajama buying is up 143% in April over March. The buying of pants is way down. Booze apparently is up as well, so I think we know what we're doing at home now. We are in our pajamas and we're boozing it up apparently, and working as well.
Yeah, a lot of parents are saying, I can't wait to get these kids back in school. We got to figure this all out. Well, folks, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day to stay informed all during the week. Sign up for our free weekly email newsletter. Give your feedback and read my weekly column. Visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. While there, subscribe to our weekly newsletter. In the meantime, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
If you think you may have COVID-19, please remember, people who are mildly ill are able to recover at home. If possible, stay in a specific sick room and stay in touch with your doctor. Be sure to seek medical care right away if your symptoms become severe, like difficulty breathing. Most important, whether you have mild symptoms or no symptoms, we should all stay home to prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
In more than 21 years on NC Spin, I never endorsed a product or sponsor, but I volunteered to do this message for family physicians. Over the past 40 years, my family doctor could quickly diagnose my illnesses because he knew my medical history. Evidence suggests I'll live longer, have a higher quality of life, and save 33% on health care costs. I believe in my trusted relationship with my family physician.
Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.